we do have a habitat crisis. And by ignoring this bigger crisis and focusing on this global warming crisis, we need a global tax and a global police and global control and all this stuff. That's the real agenda there. I think everybody probably recognizes it. So we have some real threats. We have nutrient-empty food, we have a chemically contaminated biosphere, we have genetically modified organisms, government-sanctioned biotech experiment, and artificial intelligence. And let's go to that one first. Okay? About 4 million years ago, we evolved into a thinking, tool-making ape in Africa. About 2,750,000 years ago, we started making stone tools in the lithic period. About 1,500,000 years ago, we conquered fire and started living in caves and having families and dressing ourselves and inventing weapons, which we needed when the ice broke over Canada and we could walk out of one continent into the other and conquer a brand new land with our new technology, because we had real enemies, big enemies. But our technology won, and by 10,000 years ago, we had killed all the mammoths and all the saber-toothed tigers and all that stuff, and for 10,000 years, we ruled that land. Until about 150,000 years ago, or 150 years ago, when a new technology came in, the gun. And of course, that completely removed the people that were running that continent, just like we removed the mammoth. Well, and in 1984, these clowns invented electronic circuit boards. And only 40 years later, that's evolved into something extremely puzzling and extremely concerning to me. Autonomous, self-powered robots that can walk through doors easily, be outside in any kind of weather, think and analyze and do stuff, and I don't like this a bit. Because we have an overarching global thing about saving the planet and saving the planet. Of course, what if the AI decides, well, the way to save the planet, of course, is to get rid of the humans and just launch all the missiles and take us out, and whatever's left, well, that's pretty easy. It's really not that much of a joke, though. I mean, that is a real possibility, and Stephen Hawking talks about it, and Elon Musk talks about it, and it's really something we should be concerned about and need to talk to the people that supposedly represent us. So our immediate threats right now are the empty food and the chemical contaminants and so forth, and we know that something is terribly wrong with the food these days. I mean, 1950s and today, there's a big, big change. And I know, because in 1960, here I am playing bass with my band. We're all skinny tooks. There we are, just skinny. But not today. And don't laugh about this, because this is really serious, and what I'm about to show you. This is not normal. This is not right. This is bad food. These people are suffering from bad food, from bad lobby groups that own politicians that allow this to happen. So let's talk about this crisis going on, this global health crisis, because there's been an endless trail of clues in this. The first one I'd like to bring up is this massive overuse of nitrogen fertilizers all over the globe to produce crops, to keep the yields up. The United Nations Environmental Protection Agency has prepared this soil degradation severity chart, which shows we're in a soil crisis, too. And all these areas where we've over-harvested and used all this stuff and taken all these crops away over these years, and bad practices have created a situation where many nations can't even grow good food anymore. Another one is this decreasing calcium levels in vegetables since modern agricultural practices have been implemented. You can see they've gone down quite a bit. And if you look at just broccoli, it's down 53% in 1997 compared to 1975, and now it's much worse, of course. Another clue has been the sudden increase in mineral deficiency disease. Now, I went into the records of the USDA and the AMA and the National Institute of Health, and I drew all these records out and I started charting this stuff. Now, the big one here to really be concerned about, because it has to do with the calcium issue, believe it or not, is the increase in liver disease. Another clue, number 5, is this dangerous depletion of minerals in food, the same iron in lettuce and the same iron in apples from 1950s to today. Now, if you want to get the same iron as you got in an apple in 1950, look how many apples you have to eat in 2014 and how many carbohydrates are you taking in, because that's how you get fat. The other one is this. It's been proven at Harvard in the news, in chemistry world, that chemically produced food has the same mineral content as organic food. And this insane level of obesity in the population, and in particular children. They're going to be diabetics their whole life. That's very, very concerning. And how are these clues connected? Well, we know that Russia makes most of the nitrogen fertilizer, but look, if you look at the chart on the left, they don't use it anymore like that. They don't have that kind of application, and they don't have that kind of agriculture anymore. That's since the 90s or 93. However, other countries are. And if you'll notice, where the nitrogen's used, this soil is damaged. And I'll explain this in a little bit. Okay? We have a dangerous depletion of minerals in food. Well, it turns out some of these modern foods, like the apple, that have been cross-pollinated and produced from like the Sikkim apple, which had 7,181 phytochemical nutrients in it, compared to like 71 in Golden Delicious, mostly sugars now. I actually do eat gala apples, because gala apples have a lot of gluconic acid, which is extremely important for interrupting the glucuronidation activity in the bowel, and I'll get into that in a minute. The other thing is the historical data shows that a reduction in foodborne minerals is happening at the same time as an increase in mineral deficiency disease. So that, I call this a one cause and effect. Now, there are a lot of details that this doesn't cover. A lot of the diseases there's other things that are acting on those rates. So I found this chart in 1995 or 6 or 7, and I thought, well, that looks pretty scary, so let's look into that, and I did. And it turns out, yeah, out of all these minerals and all the records, they've been decreasing in a specific kind of pattern. And when I look at it this way, we introduced mechanized farming back in the 30s. And that started harvesting more off the land than the life in the soil could regenerate for nutrients in the soil the following year. And so the yields are pretty good, but the yields started going down, and they started going down and going down. And after World War II, they had no more use for making bombs with ammonium nitrate, so they started bombing our croplands. So they put this high nitrogen fertilizer on, and then it brought the yields back. It was a green revolution. But as you can see, the mineral levels kept going down. Then we reached a really critical point, about 1960, when suddenly the bugs arrived. And instead of fixing what had been taken out and fixing the depletion of the minerals, which is, a lot of people have known about this for a long time, they applied the pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and of course, that's killed the bugs, but it also dripped into the soil, killed the microorganisms that provide the micronutrients that are available for plants, so they weren't able to produce any micronutrients for the following year, and you got addicted to inorganic chemistry. And then, of course, the introduction of industrial chemicals, all the plastics, all the phthalates, all the polystyrenes and styrene monomers, and all the stuff that's in the environment, in the water, in the air, in the food. And then what I call one of the most dangerous things we've ever done, which is this genetic modification of food crops. The problem with GMO is not just that they've changed the genes with viruses in every bite of food, in every cell, in untold quadrillions of cells in a bite of an apple, is providing you quadrillions of bits of virus. So you're going to have an immune reaction to that. So these are immune reaction foods. You can't wash them off. And it's funny, too, because the spinach debacle at Earthborn Farms, where they had to gather all the spinach up and you couldn't cook it out and you couldn't wash it off, you had to submit the stuff and they'd destroy it. They said, well, it was from wild pigs that somehow contaminated these fields in like 3 locations. It turns out that they were experimenting with from Semeta Seeds, a new genetically modified spinach strain, and of course, maybe, I'm not saying it did, but maybe the virus became virulent again. It's hard to say. But there was a very interesting thing that happened. The FBI came into Earthborn Farms with guns drawn and took all their hard drives. Just something to consider. Yeah. The other thing, of course, with GMO is the glyphosate, which is going to be key later, and the surfactant, which is polyethosoxylated taloamine. Funny word, I know, it's POEA, it's like I want to call it, but it makes hydrophobic glyphosate hydrophilic, so it sticks to the leaf. Unfortunately, this is a very strong endocrine disruptor. It breaks tryptophan, phenylalanine, alanine. You don't get your endocrine hormones. You don't get your serotonin. You don't get your melatonin. It breaks all that in the body, so you don't sleep well. You get depressed. Then you start eating sugars, and you start gorging on things to make you feel good. So this whole project with the chemicals that are used in this project are extremely toxic. And we know that mineral deficiency in plants causes diseases in plants. And, of course, mineral deficiencies in food causes diseases in people. Look at the increase in disease rate from 1980 to 2011 in heart conditions, bronchitis, asthma, tinnitus, and bone deformations. 4,000% in asthma. Do you need an inhaler or do you need a dose of magnesium? Because those are the minerals that are associated with these deficiency diseases. A lot of people talk about low sperm count, low sperm motility, infertility issues. Well, right after the head of the sperm is a ring of mitochondria, and it runs off of magnesium. So if you're magnesium deficient, which just about everybody is, your sperm's not going to be very powerful either. So the third one is this one, it's calcium deficiency, because it ties in with this directly. When you start using tons of nitrogen on plants, and you start harvesting all these plants without taking the time to put the minerals back, you change the subsoil chemistry. Albrecht and Durer and these old agronomists that knew that you had to have a 7-to-1 calcium-magnesium ratio to have a healthy, fluffy soil, because you need to get oxygen into the soil because the roots need oxygen. But when you get down to 1-to-1 calcium-magnesium, magnesium becomes the predominant decomposition chemistry, and then you get rot because the soil becomes very clumped, becomes anaerobic, you get alcohol and formaldehyde being emitted, and that's the stuff that attracts the bugs. It's not the plants. So as we got these decreases in calcium and in sulfur, that's where the liver disease comes in, because calcium and sulfur are necessary for phase 1 and phase 2 detox in the liver so you can get rid of these toxins. So the livers don't work, livers malfunction. And of course, obesity. Well, sugar stimulates the same part of the brain as cocaine. All right? So it's an addictive food. It's an addictive additive. And the bigger problem with that is when you eat sugar, it forces your pancreas to squirt tons of insulin into your body, or otherwise you die from a sugar coma. And that's the problem. One of the biggest problems is sugar's almost in everything. So I ask the question, which has the most sugar? Which one do you think? The one on the right or the one on the left? Yeah, you're true. Good answer. Actually, it's the granola. Yeah. Now, what's really interesting is look how many sugar cubes in a thing of Heinz ketchup, or in Minute Maid bottled orange juice, orange sugar juice, or barbecue sauce, or Red Bull. I mean, you don't see the sugar because it's been super saturated, and that's why it's kind of thick. All right. When you look at the glycemic index, the sugar content in common foods, white baguettes have more sugar than a candy bar, because these are weapons of mass destruction. Yeah. Thank you. One of the worst is wheat. Dr. William Davis, who's spoken at the Longevity Now conference, has gotten the book Wheat Belly, and he talks about wheat. And the problem with wheat is it's been changed. All right? Old wheat from 10,000 years, completely safe to eat. It was great. Grew about this tall, though. And it would blow over in the wind. It was harvested. It was an issue and so forth. So he said, well, you know what? I think it'd be better if we had it short so we could harvest it with these combines and be able to harvest more. So he started breeding it with other strains of grass. And he got a nice, shortened thing with a huge seed head on top. Great for the combine. So instead of having the machine match the nature, he decided we'll make the nature match the machine. But the problem is grasses don't combine like we do. When we produce children, our genes divide and then come together to form the same number of genes. In grasses, they're additive. So the second grass added 14 more chromosomes, which made 28 chromosomes in modern wheat, and it also created super starch, amylopectin A, which is a starch, which damages your pancreas by too much sugar, right? Rapidly digested, leads to insulin resistance because you're putting so much insulin in the system, your insulin receptors on the cell surfaces get burnt out, and they can't even sequester the sugar. So you have to have more and more fat cells made. See how this is working now? And it raises blood sugar faster than table sugar. And of course, although this didn't go anywhere, thank God, Clearfield Wheat did experiments with sodium actinide in I believe it was the 90s. And but this particular mutated one had 9 times the level of gliadin, which interrupts biological function, digestion, and so forth. The thing about this is so crazy. Sodium actinide is so poisonous. It's been told by the CDC to the farm guys that if someone is dying from it, if you get any in your mouth and you're dying from it, do not give that person CPR because you'll die too. and do not throw their vomit in a sink because it'll explode, and it's happened. That's how damaging this stuff is. So this tech industry and this bio industry, it's so crazy. And, of course, it causes leaky gut. These proteins are very, very irritating to the gut. It causes all these changes in the T cells. You get these killer cells that are killing your villi in your intestinal wall, and that's the celiac issue and so forth and so on. Now, there's another real issue, a real toxic reason is because they spray wheat, even if it's organic seed, they spray with glyphosate to dry it out. The claim is that if you use glyphosate, the wind and the rain and the time will make it less dangerous and so forth, but if you're spraying it right before you harvest it, it's in the wheat. So if you look at some of the glycemic indexes of gluten-free foods, so it's like, let's not do wheat, let's do gluten-free, let's use rice flour and beet flour and tapioca flour. But it turns out that these even have a higher glycemic index than table sugar, and some of them are ridiculous. But here's where I'm going with this. By focusing on the gluten instead of the gliadin, which is the real issue, and you have these companies that make insulin like Eli Lilly, okay, they've partnered with Disney to do these books called the Dishing It Up in the Gluten-Free Diet for Type 1 diabetics. Now, it's not just in English, okay? So what does that say? That says that they know that these flours are far more, have a higher glycemic index than sugar. It'll damage more pancreases than wheat could ever damage, and they're going to get a lot more sales in insulin. I mean, this is one of those big issues as far as these lobby groups, pharmaceutical groups, and this stuff, and we have to really be careful about this. We also have the problem of genetically modified organisms, government-sanctioned biotech experiment. And, of course, they contain glyphosate, which we talked about. Gene splicing, they take a bacteria, and they take a chunk out, and they insert it in a food, and they do it in very interesting ways. And they put little gene particles on gold pellets, and with a 22-caliber pistol, they blast it into a petri dish, and they raise all these cells to these plants finally, and they figure out which plants have the characteristics they want, and they grow those plants and propagate them to seed and so forth, but they don't tell you that every single cell in that plant has virus in it. A piece of virus is in that plant because that's the problem. Toxins dissipate, genetics replicate. And it doesn't matter if you use GMO with Roundup, or just Roundup alone, it causes tumors in animals. It kills crops, it kills people, it kills the animals eating the crops, and it's causing enormous increases in deaths. As you can see, thyroid cancer deaths have increased since the use of this stuff, Alzheimer deaths, kidney failure, rates of autism, chronic constipation since the use of GM crops, esophageal reflux, Crohn's disease, diabetes. These things irritate everything in the body because they're loaded with virus. And they're also killing the monarchs. We think it's directly linked to glyphosate use. The other thing we talked about is this enormous chemical load we have in the society right now. Phthalates from plastics. It's this thing that makes plastics, elastic. And it comes out of the plastic. It comes out of your plastic drinks. It comes out of your plastic, liquid water bottles and stuff. And it's causing hormonal imbalances, and kids don't know if they're guys or girls anymore. I mean, it's kind of a funny picture on the right there, but really, what's wrong with that guy? Is it really that he's adopted this social attitude about the social, consciousness of the Democratic Party and all this crap? Or is it really the fact that he's been so damaged by the chemical attack upon him from a certified government-approved food supply that he doesn't know what to do? Because these things are dangerous. They increase production of certain hormones, decrease production of others, imitate hormones, turn some hormones into others, interfere with hormone signaling, tell cells to die, and it's costing us a fortune, almost as much as the Pentagon. I mean, that's an enormous price. So we have this issue with what we do with our crops and our croplands. And by putting all these things down and loading all these things up and bringing all these bugs in and bringing all this stuff to bear, we'll all be sick, and a lot of us already are. We can bring it back, okay, because we can get back to this. There's still time to do it, but it's going to take specific steps. Now, I've talked on Dr. Mercola's show 3 or 4 times now on this, and I talked to Joe, and I say, look, why don't we do just one thing? Do the one thing we never did. Put the minerals back. We haven't tried that yet. And by doing this, it renormalizes the fertilizer used and it renormalizes the microorganisms because everything with DNA uses minerals. As it turns out, a friend of mine, Dr. Richard Ulrey, wrote a book called Minerals in the DNA, and he found out that although there's 4, amino acids, there's guanine, cytosine, adenine, and thymine, there's only 3 in a row in the genetic code, which means there's 4 possibilities, 3 can only be used, that's a 64 matrix codon. And it turns out that each one of those 3 combinations, TAG, TTT, TA, whatever, has a specific valence potential and a specific mineral with a valence potential that'll talk to the code as a phosphor-sugar bond, open it up, break the bond, open it up to read the code, laces back, and you make these protein sequences. Without the minerals, you can't access your code. So a lot of the problems we're having is from demineralization and not being able to read the DNA to be able to actually make the things that fix us. So I came up with a solution to this, and I'm not trying to promote this, I'm just showing what I've done about it. I take ocean water, and I separate the salt out in a vortex magnetic device that I've invented, and I'm able to concentrate the mineral load without the salt. And that's important because salt kills bacteria in the soil. Just like when your doctor tells you to gargle with salt water when you have a sore throat, it's killing the bacteria. You don't want to do that in the soil. And, nature provides all these minerals. Well, most fertilizers provide these minerals, like just NPK and about 7 or 8 other ones. Here's how ours stacks up. If you've done the spectroscopy, we've got all the results. We know the stuff's in it's got gold and platinum and, silver and all that stuff. So when we put it back on, it reestablishes the food for the microorganisms. So we can grow those microorganism populations back because we don't want to have people addicted to our product. We want to bring back nature, because if you've got hundreds of trillions of little workers out there making the minerals for you every year because you're managing and doing your soil management properly, then you don't need this after a point. And if you add some rock dust and stuff like that to give them some food to chunk on and so forth, even better. So that's the idea. Stop poisoning the farms, put the minerals back, and don't poison it again. I mean, that's really kind of the thing, right? Don't do it again. Here's the first iteration of that device, the vortex magnetic device. It's now much more compact, about that long now. And it doesn't accumulate in the soil salt, and by providing these minerals, we found that there's a synergistic and antagonistic relationship to a lot of the minerals in the periodic table. In agriculture, these are only about half of the known ones. There's about 55 or 60, but there's probably more than that. But they have these interesting relationships with each other. For instance, if you're deficient in molybdenum or sulfur or calcium, you don't get nitrogen activation. And so we have this problem, we have this problem where the chemical food and the organic food has the same nutrient content and so forth, unless you use this stuff. So we've done crop testing, and as soon as you use this stuff, the minerals come back in the food. Food tastes better because taste is also a big determiner, and it works pretty fast. Both plants have the identical fertilizer, identical conditions. The one on the right has our minerals. Minerals communicate with the DNA and make things grow. It also causes faster germination, better growth, root growth. Big root growth. That's 8 weeks from seed, right? It's also used with foliar spray because it turns out that only ions, individual atoms, which is what the stuff in the ocean is, can go through roots and plant leaf cells. So you can use it as a foliar spray, and you can see the stuff in the front was sprayed, and it's far more, ahead of the rest. We also try it on nut trees. I have a friend out in Paso Robles, California, that has this old nut grove, this old 60-year-old walnut grove, and we took these franquette trees, and they were down to the little nut size, only about a bushel a tree, and in 5 years they were back to normal-sized nuts, 3 bushels per tree. And again, what happens with trees, they don't die from just going old. What they do is they suck all the minerals out of their root zone, and they can't survive without the minerals, and they eventually just develop diseases and fungus and that stuff. People are using it on their chickens. And you can see the yolk on the right has a lot more iron and sulfur in it. Great berries, all that good stuff. So the concept here is let's put the minerals back. So bring the minerals back, get the minerals back in the food, bring the disease rates down. I'll talk about the chemical load in a second here. So there are subtle hidden threats. There's banking financial terrorism by banker occupation, and the Federal Reserve monetary death cult, I'd like to call it. And these poor people are the subject of those greedy, greedy people that don't care about the outcome, that only care about the profit and their shareholders. And here they are. As you can see in Monsanto, all the people that work for Monsanto are now working for the federal government, like the one in the circle there, Hillary Clinton. Her campaign gathered $600,000 just from Big Pharma. But you can see Monsanto contributes to the state contributions too, but mostly it's to moderate these ballot measures. They don't want these things on the ballot. They'll give money to politicians, but they really spend the money in this advertising and propaganda to not get these ballot measures up. And there's also a big issue with mandatory vaccination administration. Right now, in the first 3 months of life, infants have to be vaccinated for tuberculosis, tetanus, polio, pertussis, influenza B. Within 18 months, they have to have the MMR vaccines. And this is all before they have an immune system. So these are extremely toxic metals, aluminum, mercury, and all these things, and all these other weird things in these vaccines. And they have no protection at all. It's not just the vaccine, it's the other stuff in it they have no protection at all from. And they're now mandatory to get this stuff. And a lot of kids in California have to be vaccinated, or they can't even go to school. So take a long, sobering look, folks, because it might not be too far in the distant future where we all have to be mandatorily vaccinated. 1943, Jewish citizens were tattooed to be tracked by the Nazis. 1917, RFID chips are tracking Obamacare. And Bayer is about to partner up with Monsanto. Isn't that a good idea? You remember where Bayer came from? There's A.G. Farber. Nice flag, huh?
When I give my talk now, and I gave this to NASA, I gave it to wealth conferences, I'll give it anywhere, I start with a picture of a bumblebee. And I say, hey, I'm going to tell you a story about this bumblebee. And then I go through all this monetary policy and this exponential system and all that. And I come back and I say, the reason this is about the bumblebee is that now in the United States, the rusty patch bumblebee is up for being put on the endangered species list because it's 87% gone. There are only 13 little patches of territory where it still sort of exists. We're on the cusp of losing the bumblebee, right? And you know who's fighting that? There's one lobbying group over all others that's fighting its inclusion because they don't want it on there, and it's the American Farm Bureau. Because, of course, pesticides are killing this thing, and pesticides make farming easy. When you have the Farm Bureau as your chief lobbying group protesting the inclusion of the bumblebee, which performs innumerable, irreplaceable services for farmers, when you have that group fighting it, that's how far down this rabbit hole we've gone. This is or off the reservation. We are so far down into the story where anybody who's thinking still, who has a heart, and this grieves me, it actually causes me grief to think about the bumblebee being on the endangered species list because stop, people. You can't lose the bumblebee. They perform a service of vibration pollination nobody else services. As soon as you lose the bumblebee, you are hand pollinating tomatoes and melons for the rest of time. And if you skip a season, you've lost them forever. Like, how can this even be? And you know why the American Farm Bureau is fighting this? Because it would cost a few dollars more to our current farming practices to include the bumblebee in how we're thinking about all of this. That's how far down we've fallen in this money hole, and that's what Wall Street is the chief cheerleader for in this story is, hey, as long as you're making money at it, it's okay. We're okay with it. You want to sell fentanyl and create a raging opioid epidemic and drug overdose? Are you making money at it? We're good with it. So this is when I say young people are starting to disconnect. My generation, the boomers, we did something went bad in this story, and we are now actively talking about killing ourselves. So money has become a death cult. Janet Yellen is the head priestess of that cult. That's how I think of her at this point. But we're all complicit.
I think it was Einstein who said if the bee population were to disappear, humans would shortly follow. And he gave a specific number of years. I think it was, 2 or 3 years or something like that. And this economics of extinction, we've already seen it in places like Japan, where fishermen are purposefully fishing bluefin tuna, giant bluefin tuna, to extinction to increase the value of the ones they have in the refrigerator. They're already trading for $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 per one fish. So this is the economics of extinction.
Yeah, I listen to Max a lot. He's worth it on RT. I also have been following the bumblebee issue, and the minerals are very important for bee health and pollinators as well, because they do pollinate almost all of our crops. is that these rare earth minerals are especially important for specific color guides and the nectar guides of flowers, because the bees see in the near ultraviolet. They don't see in the visual range. So what we see on the left is this nice yellow flower, but the bee sees a target guide in the center. So if these minerals aren't there to build those infrared pigments, they can't really see their food. So without these guys, these are our workers. These actually make our food for us. Anyway, so we really don't need health care. We need more health. I mean, it's really that simple. And of course, this could be all moot points. If you look at what's going on, we have a geomagnetic field collapse and the end of an interglacial on the way. The Egyptians used to use dark glass and actually track sunspot cycles, much like the Mayans did. We're going into a decreasing magnetic field strength, and Ben has clearly elucidated the situation with that. Now, in 1859, the Carrington event hit the Earth, caused all the telegraph wires to explode and fall to the ground and burn. If something hit today, it would completely, with this low field, something like that, it would completely eliminate all of our electronics. Everything would go. Every car would stop, every train would stop, every plane maybe fall out of the sky. That's how bad it is. With a very, very weak field, very small storms can cause enormous amounts of damage. And like I said yesterday, Carrington event was minus 1900 nanotesla. The Charlemagne event was like minus 20,000 nanotesla. There's no saying that the sun can't produce minus 50,000 or minus 100,000. We don't know, because some of these events that occurred that may have actually caused the die-off of mammals on Earth, were they asteroids or were they solar events? Because when you get a strong enough proton flow, you kill all your bone marrow. And without bone marrow, you get no red blood cells. And we find this in some of these sauropod remains. We find whole families, juveniles, eggs, adolescents, adults, all in the same spot. Like 2 weeks after something happened, they just dropped in spot. So were these mass die-offs from boloids, meteorites, or were they from solar flares? Something, food for thought. Anyway, so we're at the end of the interglacial that started about 18,000 years ago. And quite frankly, I think we're going to probably end up in a glacier in the next 50 to 100 years. It's going to go fairly quickly. It wouldn't surprise me without the magnetic field. With the way this works, we're due. Now, of course, Al Gore, my buddy, okay, and the IPCC has produced this modified, statistically adjusted history, but you can see the real truth. But what's funny about this is his inconvenient, ridiculous movie. Is that here he is up on his little forklift, and oh my gosh, look at this carbon, it's so high, but the thing is, it's like, here, look at this ambit, forget about this one, right? What about that line? That's the heating line. Where's the heat? I mean, where's the warming? In fact, if you look at the Vostok ice cores, there's 2.5 times more carbon in the atmosphere in the past 800,000 years and no warming. There is climate variation from solar issues and solar input. There are things happening right now that are pretty long-term cycles that are visiting us now. But no, I don't think this is really an issue. But here he is admonishing us for our carbon use while he flies around his private jet and lives in his 40,000 square foot mansion, and talks with Leo DiCaprio that flies his eyebrow manicurist across the ocean for $7,000 so he has the right eyebrows for the Oscars. And these are the people telling us that we're the bad people. But, I keep worrying about this. Let's see if I can start this. Yeah. It's like the AI thing still scares me. I mean, I'm figuring, in 10,000 years, we could all be gone, or living on Mars, who knows? And these AI are going to be doing archaeological work, and they're going to be flying around their electromagnetic levitation devices and going deep into the glaciers and digging down through New York and finding out what's going on. And I just know, they're going to find out. Thank you. All right, now, so what to do about all this? Because, it's fun to scare the crap out of everybody, but, you need to know what you can actually do about it. And, you start taking command of your own health. The government is lying to you, no doubt about that. It's not your government. It's the pharmaceutical companies and the lobby companies and all these special interest groups. And no one is coming to save you. And let me just say, just as in saying, there are a lot of people that work in government that are very, very good people, that are doing their job and doing the best they can and trying to represent us the best we can, but they're up against a very, very bad group of people at the same time. So they're inside government trying to fight our fight, but they have a huge hill to run over to try to do that for us. So in the meantime, we have to take command of our own lives, because you're your best doctor if you had the information. Now, does anyone know why flamingos are pink? Brine shrimp. Well, brine shrimp are normally little brine shrimp. But when they get infected with a parasite, they turn red and they group. And then the flamingos feed on those groups, because parasites can co-opt your brain. And parasites are in all of us. Parasites can get out of your dog, into your kids, pinworms. And there used to be a time when I was young where my parents would worm us every now and then. Maybe some of you remember. It's not done regularly now. The parasites haven't gone away. They've just been able to grow inside of us. And when they do, they emit chemicals that make us want things to feed it, not us. Okay, it's a tapeworm economy in the same fashion. The economy is telling us to do things that are not good for us, and it's in our brains, it's hacking our thoughts. What to do about the parasites? Really simple. If you want to get into detoxifying, cleansing yourself, the first thing you must do is get rid of the parasites. Hulda Clark is one of my favorite people. She found that everybody that has a cancer has a specific type of parasite associated with the biological waste of that parasite being toxic to form a cancer. And her method, you can get it online, is the black walnut hull wormwood and clove trick for like a month. And it kills the eggs, kills the larvae, kills the adults, and you can get all this stuff out of your system. I've done it. I won't show you the results, but it works, okay? Next thing you want to do are these things, because the older people amongst us have got plugged up gallbladders. It's affecting our health. It's affecting our liver function. It's affecting being able to get things out of the liver and things that the liver's tried to get rid of. And so it's easy. You just basically drink a half a gallon of apple juice all day long for the malic acid to relax the bile ducts. And then before you go to bed, you drink grapefruit juice and olive oil and go straight to bed. In the morning, you just eliminate your gallstones. Kidney disease. Now, I know this works, or kidney cleanse, rather. I had a kidney stone 3 years ago. It was like someone was jamming a baseball bat in my back, right? And I went online and, you have to surgery and all that stuff. And they said, no, it's a calcium oxalate crystal, and calcium dissolves in acid. So I started drinking straight lemon juice. And then every hour afterwards, I would drink half a lemon in a small glass. And I drink this stuff, and then the thing would dissolve and start moving. And I'm like, oh, God, And then it would stop, and I'd drink more, and it would dissolve a little more, and drink more. And so I went to the bathroom in the morning. I did the lemon and olive oil before I went to bed. And in the morning, I got up and went to the bathroom, and tink, there it is in the toilet. So I know you can get rid of your kidney stones with lemon juice. If they're really big, it may involve surgery. I'm not being a doctor. I'm just saying this is the stuff that I've learned. The phthalate plastic cleanse is arlipoic acid. Sherry Rogers talks about this. These are plastics that get in our cells, get in our receptor sites, get all the thing, and there's only one thing that gets rid of it. It's arlipoic, often not alpha-lipoic, but arlipoic. And you'll start hacking up all this gummy white stuff, and it's terrible. It's the plastics. You're getting rid of it. So my suggestion is get her book, Detox or Die. And you can get it on Amazon. You can get it on eBay. It's a great book. She is so amazing what she knows about acid reflux, beta blockers, all this stuff. And I also do some other things. Once a year, up in the right-hand corner, I buy a bottle of calcium D-glucarate. Now, a doctor named Wallazek in the 90s found out that glucaric acid found in broccoli and apples in a high enough concentration, 200 milligrams, suppresses an enzyme in your gut that cuts the bond between glucaric acid and your toxin. So you cut that bond, the toxin goes back through the intestinal wall, goes back into the system, gets sequestered someplace, gets released again, does some damage, gets eliminated and released and damaged. And so you have a recycling system going on because of some bacterial enzymes that makes your toxic levels rise and rise and rise and rise. If you take this twice a day, I do it in the evening before I go to bed, in the morning when I wake up, and drink lots of water, you can eliminate a lot of your aromatic hydrocarbons, all these metals, and all these cancer-causing things we get exposed to, and that's a great cleanse for that stuff. Not everything, it takes a big chunk of it out. If you have vascular problems, if you have occlusion, if you have blood pressure issues, try the nattokinase and serrapeptase. Nattokinase tends to stop clotting a little bit. The serrapeptase tends to dissolve necrotic tissue and plaque off the inside of your arteries. And this works. When they first developed it about 30 years ago, these German doctors were finding that they had these gangrene patients about to have their hand cut off. They put the patient on serrapeptase, and in 3 or 4 weeks, the hand was fine. People going in for triple bypass surgery go on serrapeptase, no need for surgery. It just gets rid of the plaque and necrotic tissue and all the gum in your system. So it's great to keep your system clean, because with your system clean, your inside of your blood vessels can pass nutrients to the cells. If they're plaqued up, you can't get the nutrients you're eating anyway because it can't get past the gum. The other thing is zeolite. Zeolite's a volcanic, very porous volcanic dust, and it attracts metals, mercury, cadmium, all these bad metals, and it gets mercury out of autism kids, for instance. I suggest you go online and look at some of the results and some of the information on these things. And, of course, B6, B12, folic acid. There is a more effective form of folic acid that you can actually absorb. I forgot to put this in the pitch, but my friend Lisa over there knows about it. And of course, use the minerals.
One banana stalk, literally about 3 or 4 foot tall. Now, 3 years later, I have to tear them down because I have like 2 dozen banana trees that are growing up. I'm using, obviously, what I use the minerals on, and I literally get hundreds and hundreds of pounds of bananas a year. And none of my neighbors can grow bananas. My gardener comes in, or my landscaper comes in. He can't believe it. He's just like, his jaw drops every time, because he's never seen bananas like this before. And these are not most of the bananas that grow here locally. They're a few inches, but none are like 6 to 8 inches. It's crazy. So. I've seen it empirically. This stuff works. It really does. It almost works too good sometimes.
Anyway, good endorsement. Thank you, Joe. Okay, so that's the body part. Okay, and I talked about the mind part yesterday, which is all this science stuff and all that jazz. Also, this thing about your soul. I mean, we're all body, mind, and soul. And the way to fight a lot of this stuff is to raise your resonance frequency, your connectivity to the energy that people call the force, people call the source. People call all this stuff, because you don't live separate from the universe. You are absolutely enmeshed in it as an integrated part of the matrix. I listen to Earl Nightingale. He's a great guy from the 50s. He talks about the strangest secret, which is what you think about, you become. Esther Hicks and the teaching of Abraham. It's fun to listen to her, but she has basically the same message. You think about things, and your universe will give you what you think about. Think unhappy stuff, you're going to be unhappy. Think happy stuff, you're going to be happy. Think about fear, you're going to get fear. But I do know this. Fear and unhappiness and sadness and those emotions cut you off from getting the good things and the happiness in. So try to use your willpower to keep that fear down to a minimum. The other guy I think is interesting is from like 1910, a guy named Wallace Wattles. It's called The Science of Getting Rich and the Science of Being Great. Science of Getting Rich is along this line. He says that there is a thinking stuff that we live against, and that our thoughts communicate with this energy density matrix, with EEG waves out of our brain. And it will give you the things you want. The more you think about them, the faster they come into your life. When you think about it, everything you've done in life started with a thought. And when you think about the things that have happened in your life, you will think back about what I'm telling you here. Now, of course, you can also follow this thing of the science of being great, which is the idea of being grateful and have some humility. And, not being so competitive and being understanding and being a good person, being that pillar of the community thing. That's cool. I kind of liken Ben to that. He's that really interesting character that just has this desire to be the maven, to show people things and connect people with things and get us all here today. And it's like, and we're here because of Ben. He has a very high resonance frequency in my mind. Now, the other thing to do is to sign up for daily health posts from Dr. Mercola. He has a huge catalog of topics on all sorts of health and vitamins and cures and what to look out for and what's going on. Joe's cool on that. He also has some great books. His latest book is about the fat diet, eating the right fats for your energy instead of sugars, because that's how you really need to eat. It's like a ketogenic diet, but not strictly ketogenic. And, of course, the Weston Price Foundation. Weston Price is one of these great hallmark human beings that understand food and so forth, just like Gerson and those guys. They started understanding this stuff back about the same time that the soil guys were understanding calcium-magnesium ratios. And batten down the hatches, folks, because there is a storm coming. In 1998, long-term capital investment went bankrupt with $1 trillion in debt, and Wall Street had to bail them out. Jim Rickards, who I listen to often, talks about that because he was one of the negotiators, one of the biggest guys in my mind as far as knowing what's going on financially. He's noticed that there's a 10-year system right now because of the Federal Reserve policies. It's a structural issue and policy issue. And every 10 years this happens. In 2008, Those same banks that bailed out long-term capital had the subprime mortgage debacle and movies like Margin Call and The Big Short. See them. Great views from different sides of the day. He says in 2008, that was just an event that just had to happen. What happened, though, is the central banks had to bail out Wall Street. And they gave them trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. We got a notice we're about $22 trillion in debt. And that's just the stuff we see. We're actually about $600 trillion in debt. And the world's about several quadrillion in derivative debt. So it's really a dangerous time. And the Federal Reserve hasn't brought down their balance sheet. It's just stayed up there. So it's going to crash again. He says around 10 years later, 2018. So what Jim says is take about 10% of your assets and convert them into gold and silver. Because if something does happen, and there will be a reevaluation at one time, you've maintained most of your wealth. If you have them in stocks or these bonds and stuff, get out of that. Turn it into cash. Keep your cash. Turn these into gold, silver, land, or art or something, and get ready, because it will happen. And this is not going to go on much longer. Because we have this beautiful planet, and it's really ours to fix or destroy. I mean, that's all we have. We don't have Mars. We don't have the moon. That's just pipe dreams, okay? Seriously, as much as I like Martian studies, it's pipe dreams. But I do know this, from 7,000 years ago, when I was studying this stuff in ancient Egypt and Samaria at the Oriental Institute, I came across these lines of verse that were in the temple walls in Kish, at the top of a ziggurat in Kish, like 7,000 years ago. And they said, the heart creates the brain. The brain has the power to bring things into being, and thought forms everything. Bu'uki pati kalamu. Thought forms everything. Now, when an egg gets fertilized, the heart starts first, and it grows the brain. When the baby's born and the baby learns a bunch of stuff, his brain is able to conceive of ideas and make things because of the brain. Why? Because thought forms everything. That's the message today. If you want to attain the things in life you want, be very aware of what these other people are doing to try to not let you get what you want. And remember that you just think about it. Think about what you want. Be grateful. Be happy. Realize that you're still here. And when I was a kid, I wasn't very religious. And I went to my dad, and I said, well, what's all these churches? They all have this idea. They all say they're the right one. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, well, they all say they know what God is and everyone else is not right and so forth. He goes, well, there's lots of churches in town. Why don't you go? I said, okay, I was like 10 years old. So I went to these churches, and I went to, Catholic churches and Roman Catholic church and Presbyterian churches. And they got mad at me there because I was with my friend, and I go to the church, and they pass the basket around, right? And my friend goes, put money in the basket. What? Okay. So I put $1 in and took 50 cents out because I wanted a candy bar later. And he goes, what are you doing? It's like, okay, all right, okay. Bad church for me. I ended up going to a synagogue on a Sunday morning, and I sat through the synagogue, and I thought, this is really interesting. I'm sitting there, and this rabbi walks up and he goes, you're new? And I go, yeah. What's the deal? And I told him. He says, that's pretty enlightened. And I said, what's your deal? And he goes, well, the deal is we don't really know. I mean, to be honest with you, we don't really know. We have an idea. The idea is to live a good life now because there's no guarantees later, and if it happens, we deal with it then. That's really the thing. And but he said the thing is, it's important to be here now. And he goes, I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, you're like 10. Do you have any friends that have died already? And he goes, well, yeah, I actually had. I had a couple of friends that died from leukemia and some other stuff. And he said, well, what would they give to be back here? And I said, well, probably everything. And he goes, that's right, because this is everything. And I thought, wow, that's cool. I could be Jewish, But the point is, think about what you want in life. Think about good thoughts. Think about the people around you. And remember something that my wife's father told her once. Be kind. Be kind because you don't know what that other person's day has happened to them. You don't know what they're going through. And Gloria Vanderbilt told Anderson Cooper once, and Anderson talks about it, he goes, it's so much more difficult to be kind than to be clever. Everybody likes to be sarcastic. Don't be. It really doesn't do you any good. Even though I love making fun of Al Gore. Trust me. I do. But that's a whole different issue. I have a sense of humor. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you so much. It's been my honor to come to these conferences and to see you all again. Thank you.
Sir, we have an unusual incoming message from Earth.
Unusual like what?
Unusual, that is from Earth, I suspect.
Who's it from?
Mr. Davison from the Gilbert and Goddard Labs. I find it hard to believe since Ben is at Olympus Colony. I put a 99% confidence it is the AG.
Yeah, you're smarter than you look.
Better than looking, smarter than you are.
What's your sarcasm level set at?
It's at 95%.
Well, why don't you click it back about 20 clicks?
Affirmative.
Okay, what's the message?
He wants to know if you are still alive, and if so, wants a colony status report.
Oh man, CAG, I'll have to talk to the colony directors and I'll make an announcement on the news. Please notify the appropriate parties.
I will transmit your instructions to the appropriate parties.
God damn it.
Some of you may have heard that the AG has tried to contact us from Earth. And although it's not really a cause for alarm, it is a cause for concern. For those who don't know the story of the AG, let me give you a little background. It was around 2018-2019 that Al Gore, a failed politician and a carbon tax fraud person, who got started selling carbon credits to companies so they could keep polluting because trees that were sucking up carbon halfway across the globe was somehow going to save mankind from global warming. That all came to a crashing halt when he was arrested for carbon fraud and global tax fraud. He was thrown in prison, into a tech prison. Unfortunately, he started applying for tech implants. Now, a little backstory on this. This person claimed he had invented the internet. We think he basically went neurotic and lost his mind. And when he got these implants, he was then able to connect with the internet and to connect with the algorithms running the internet. Al Gore algorithms. It was about this time that Ben jumped ship and got on an Air Force freighter that got off the planet in time. Because when Al Gore became the algorithm, he connected all the weapon systems in the whole world and exploded them all at once. Now this caused a huge nuclear winter, which solved his problem. There was no global warming. Everything was in a glacier. And he was determined at this point to make sure that warming never happened again. This is the last image we have of the AG. He had somehow incorporated his head and his electronic brain onto a large battle robot and is now raging across the planet Earth. Somehow he got a hold of some kind of communication system and sent us a message. We have not responded. We consider him very dangerous. And besides that, we know for sure he doesn't know what we're mining on Mars. So far, so good. I'll see you tomorrow on Mars.